Hi everybody, my name is Vita and I am the creator of The Family Eats. And today we're going to be working on two different things at one video. The first thing is we're going to do a large family meatloaf. And the rest of the supplies, once we're done with that large family meatloaf, is we're going to also be able to combine all of similar ingredients to make up a supply of Italian meatballs. They'll be cooked as well, and they will go into the freezer once they've cooled. And when you're ready to have that big pasta dinner, you'll have all your meatballs cooked and done. You just have to thaw them out and pop them in your sauce. So I buy a full 5-pound package or more of the hamburger, and I usually do 5 pounds of hamburger and 1 pound of ground pork, just to get a little bit of a mix on the meat. Or you can substitute that ground pork with a pound of ground chicken if you want to go a little bit on the healthier side. And I try to do usually 85, 80, 20, like that on the beef. It's going to depend on your taste. If you go too far into the leaner hamburger, your meatloaf will be very dry. It'll be tough to keep it moist because you need that fat content. Okay, so let's just jump in and get started. And if you have questions at the end, I'm more than happy to answer them. Please feel free to message me. I will give you the email address at the end of this segment. And I will also provide a written recipe for each one of my demos. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to take our beautiful hamburger and our pork. And we'll start with that. And we're going to make a well in here. I think we'll be taking these rings off or they'll be getting destroyed. First of all. Okay, so we've got our hamburger, we've got our pork. The very next thing you're going to want to do is chop up a few nice cremini mushrooms. Unless you're not a mushroom person, of course, you can always leave them out. I like to put them in there for a little bit more of a savory, woodsy kind of flavor. But you don't have to. It's not a definite necessity. Move this for you so you can see what we're doing here. And I usually take them, chop them right up really nice and small. You want to get them all really nice and small. You don't want to have one real big bite of mushroom. You want it to flavor the meatloaf and the meatballs, but you don't want it to overpower or change the consistency too much. So a good hard dice on this is called for. Okay. And that just goes right in there. So it's going to be a big dump recipe. You're going to just chop and dump with the mushrooms. I would say 2 good sized ones. We'll save these 2 for the meatball mix that we're going to do. It's very similar, but you don't want your meatballs to taste just like your meatloaf. It's a very different flavor because there's a few different things. They're cooked differently, obviously. I don't fry my meatballs much anymore. I try to use a muffin pan, and I like to bake them. It's a little bit on the healthier side. Okay, so there's our 2 mushrooms in the mix. Next, we're going to go to a small dice of a white Vidalia onion. And I try to start on this bias, and you can follow these veins this way, and you'll get a good dice. And when it starts getting a little bit wobbly, just turn it. Work safe. Nothing worse than having to run to the emergency room because you were rushing through or you got too close. And again, you're going to want to have a really good dice on this. And I do everything all at one time. So if I'm doing meatballs and a meatloaf in the same setting, the same prep day, I try to cut everything up for everything rather than start from scratch for both. So yes, this does look like a lot of onions for a meatloaf because it is a lot of onions for a meatloaf. It's enough onions though for a meatloaf and a full pan of meatballs. So we're going to take this and give it a really good dice. And also, when you're making your meatloaf, you want to try and find a bigger pan. I use a large Wilton pan. It's a double large bread pan, actually, and this is my meatloaf pan because it gives me a very high meatloaf and it gives me extra long meatloaf. So I'm not worrying about having just the one meal. I can get maybe a couple sandwiches out of it, meatball sandwich for lunch, maybe even a small enough section that I can chop up and maybe put into my chili or whatever. But as long as you have a large pan that you can work with, you've got leftovers. You don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, we ate that in one setting. So I would say take about half of this for the meatloaf. I'm going to put the other half aside for the meatballs. Okay? So that going in here. And the more you can get done ahead of time, get all your things together ahead of time, the better off you're going to be. So we're going to put this aside. Okay? We're going to take a 1/4 cup of parm. And this is just shredded fresh parm that I did with the grater. Okay? We're going to put all that in here. And we'll cut some more up. I like to do that fresh. We'll cut some more up for the meatballs when we need to. Okay? So next you're going to start with your spices. Now I use Old Bay. I'm a fan for any meat that I'm cooking, whether it's poultry, fish. Alright, so we've got our Old Bay. Like I said, you can use the Old Bay for, not just for seafood, not just for poultry. I use it for beef, pork, whatever meat I'm cooking with. So the Old Bay's in there, and I say about a tablespoon, and about a half a teaspoon of smoked paprika, because I'm going to use regular paprika as well. You want to overdo it. So I would say go with about a full tablespoon of regular paprika. And then I like to take my oregano, and this is an herb that you want to reactivate. So you see I've got a good full tablespoon in the palm of my hand. But you want to rub it to reactivate it and roll it right in there. And you smell right after, oh, that's all you can smell is a really good strong oregano. And on the dried herbs, some of them you do have to reactivate them after they've been in the jar or in the bottle for a while. Same thing with your dried basil. I use 2 different forms. I do about a teaspoon of basil, dried basil, same way. And then I like to go in and take my pesto. Now you can make your own pesto or you can buy it. I'm a big advocate of convenience, so I would say buy your pesto done, unless you're making pesto as your day, that's your recipe. But if you're doing other things, have it done. About a teaspoon. This is pretty concentrated, so you don't need much more than that because you've already used the dry. Okay, so there's those. I like to use fresh minced garlic, and I've already minced it. So I would say out of this, you'll take about a teaspoon for this size meatloaf. Save the rest because we're going to be using it for the meatballs. And you cannot make Italian meatballs without a healthy amount of garlic. Okay, so there's all that. Also, all of your seasonings are in there. Your onions are in there. Your garlic is in there. Your fresh grated parm is in there. Now, I like to use seasoned Italian croutons instead of stale bread. Some people prefer the stale bread. I don't. I like this, or I like to grate maybe a heel of Italian or French bread that I've got in the freezer that I've kept, and I'll grate that fresh. But why not buy a whole package of seasoned croutons that are already seasoned? It helps with the Italian seasoning. The only thing is you do have to crush them yourself, and it's easy, not a big deal. You can do this ahead, or you can do it right when you need it. So, I got bored with crushing all those croutons that way, so I got my mini Ninja out, and I decided, why not do it really fast? So I would say you're going to need a half a cup for this size meatloaf, and then whatever is left you use for your meatballs. It's about equal, actually, half a cup for each. Okay, so set this aside for our meatballs. Then we're going to add, I would say, about a quarter cup of milk. Not crazy, you don't want to soak it, and I'll tell you why. You're going to put milk over top of all of the breadcrumbs or croutons or stale bread. However you're going to use your bread, that's how you want to add your milk. The milk helps the breadcrumbs and the meat combine, and it gets the glutens all going. And once you do that, the meatballs won't taste mealy and too bread-like rather than meat-like. So you definitely want the meat. And then you're going to start incorporating all these things because you're getting quite a full bowl here. So, not rocket science. We're going to switch to hands here in a little while. But for now, I wanted to combine the breadcrumbs and milk and not get them all over my hands and waste the fact that I put them in here. Okay. A little bit of pepper. And I would say a good hearty ground or grind your own peppercorns in. I would say a good tablespoon of pepper. Next, you're going to take one egg, one large egg. That in there. And then I use one whole egg, and then I use about, I would say, quarter cup of egg whites. So you're not adding all of that egg, okay? Just a little extra binding holds everything together. You'll do the same thing for your meatballs. Next, I like to use a good healthy splash of steak sauce. And again, for those that need to measure, there will be a recipe provided for you. But when I say a healthy splash, my healthy splash comes from how I was raised. There were no measuring cups, there were no measuring spoons in my house unless you were baking. So I'm trying to help you out here. If you don't know what that means, a good healthy splash like that is about 3 tablespoons. Same thing with your ketchup. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we got everything in there except for our fresh herbs. Now, I like to go with fresh flat leaf Italian parsley. If I've got fresh oregano, I will use some of that, but you want to go very sparingly with the fresh oregano. Very, very strong, very overpowering. So, we're going to take almost all of that, put some aside in our other bowl that we're putting together for our meatballs. You'll see how very similar they really are. Okay, this is where the fun is. Get your stuff out of the way. Save it for your meatballs when you're ready. And now you want to get right in there. Clean hands, obviously, no rings for collecting anything or putting anything else into your meatballs you don't want there. Remove the rings, okay? So we start folding and folding until everything is combined. This is the fun part. Don't mind getting all messy. This is the best way to incorporate everything that you've just added. A spoon, a fork, none of that is going to incorporate this like your hands will. You're just going to lift it and fold it. And you want to make sure that all of the meat, all of the ground meat that you're using, no matter what it is ice cold from the fridge. Because you're warming it by working it. So by the time it goes into the oven, it's not going to be ice cold anymore. And everything's going to be incorporated. Every bite gets an onion. Every bite gets a mushroom. A spoon can't do that, but your hands definitely can. Alright, so there's that. Keep a paper towel close by. Or a dish towel that's one, designate one just for your hands. Designate another one for cleanup if you need to. Not a big deal. And I always keep a garbage bag around. I hang a bag far away from my food that I'm working with to collect all of the things that I'm done with that need to be thrown away. You don't want to ever be touching a garbage pail. You don't ever want to be back and forth to the sink if you don't have to. Alright, so here is our large 9-cup meatloaf pan, which is actually an oversized Wilton bread pan, actually. It's a 11 by 3.5 by 5. So it's a good sized meatloaf. So you're going to take everything, put it into an oblong that you're working with, and you're going to put it in to your pan. And like I said, just about a total of 5 pounds is just enough. You don't want to go to the top. You want to give your pan or your meat some room to expand and contract. And this is how you do it. You got about 1 inch from the top, and you're going to form it in place. And make sure it's nice and even. That's your meatloaf. That easy, everybody. So we're going to move these out of the way, and I'm going to show you how I top it. But while we're doing that, I'm going to let the oven preheat. I would be comfortable with starting, because it's a large one, I would start with your oven preheated to 400 and let that go for a good 45-50 minutes, and then turn it down to 350 until you get a good nice crusty top on it. Slow down the cooking process a little bit and cool your oven just a little to 350. We'll keep it cooking slowly. Okay, so we're going to get our oven preheating to 400. And in the meantime, you want to put a nice surface on the top of this. There's many ways to do that. You can grate some Parmesan about halfway through and sprinkle that on top. You don't want to do that this soon. It's going to burn. It's got a long ways to go. But when it's halfway cooked, you're definitely able to do that if you want. What I like to do is either use a salsa, which is about 1 cup of salsa, or just real simple, some ketchup in a zigzag pattern on the top. Going to help keep it moist. Take some of your steak sauce again, go over the top as well. Not crazy, but so it's covered. And then you're going to take a spatula and you're just going to make sure it's all covered beautifully. That's going to give you a ton of flavor. And it's going to brown at the same time. Give you a nice crust on the top of your meatloaf. Okay. I'm going to get this in the oven. And I'm going to clear my area and we're going to start over with our meatballs while this is cooking. And we have the kitchen already engaged with all the same ingredients. So we're going to kill two birds with one stone and get our meatballs going now with the rest of the hamburger from the package that we purchased, the large package, and half of the 1 pound package of ground pork. As I said, you can always replace that ground pork with ground chicken if you would prefer a meatier, a little bit healthier of a meatball. You can make these very large and have your meal be a meatball meal with just some sauce and a fresh green vegetable on the side. But if you're making your regular meatballs that you're going to have with pasta, this is how I would go about doing it. So we're utilizing all the same ingredients at the same time and getting two things out of the way for you because life is so busy. We want to get as much done as we can at one time rather than redirtying the kitchen, getting everything out all over again and again. There's no reason for it. All right, so here's our meat. And as I said before, we've got our items that we set aside half of for doing our meatballs. So we've got our half of a whole diced sweet Vidalia onion, our parsley, so that's all going to go in. Okay, we've got our other teaspoon of garlic that we set aside. Get your supplies out all at one time rather than over and over again redoing the same steps. There's no point. I went ahead again and diced up 2 whole mushrooms to act as another meaty kind of filler, and our fresh shredded parm. I get a large block at the store, and when I need it, when I'm ready to get all my things together, I shred what I need rather than buying the shred. It's very dry. Okay, so there's onion, garlic, parsley, shredded parm. 1 egg as a binder. Also, about 1/8 of a cup of egg whites rather than another whole egg. Cuts back a little bit on the cholesterol and calories as well. So there's that. Next, we're going to go with fresh ground pepper. A good healthy dash of that. Fresh paprika. You want to go about a tablespoon. Now, when I say fresh, I try to replace all of my dry ingredients in my pantry at a minimum. Well, now I should back up there. I use so many of them and so much of them in everything that I do. But if it's been around longer than 3 months and it's getting really low, I try to use them up so I can replace them. So when I say fresh, that's what I mean, a fresh bottle, as often as you possibly can. They're inexpensive. Look around. Don't pay full price. Try to get your lesser sought out brands. Paprika is paprika, okay? Smoked paprika is something different. It's going to add a little bit more of a smoky flavor to your meat. Use this sparingly. It's pretty potent. Okay, so that's done. Next, we've got our fresh onion in there. We don't need onion powder. Our oregano, again, just to review, a good, healthy, heaping tablespoon and a half, and you're going to wake it up. Grind it between your hands to wake up that sleeping herb. Some of these sleep when they're in a plastic jar. Next, I like to use not the dry basil on my meatballs. I like to use the pesto more so than dry basil. So I would say a good healthy tablespoon of your pesto, which is basil and pine nuts and olive oil and Parmesan cheese. That's basically what a pesto is. We'll do pesto someday. Make it up in the Ninja. You'll love it. Keep it in your refrigerator. The rest of your breadcrumbs that we did in the Ninja, and those are the seasoned, Italian seasoned croutons. You can get garlic Parmesan. You can get Italian seasoning. You can get a lot of different flavored croutons now. It's going to do nothing but add to your meatballs. Why wouldn't you? Okay, so we've got left our Old Bay. Good healthy teaspoon of that. Everything is in there. Little bit of steak sauce, not much, just a little. Add to our beef flavor. I add just a splash until we're ready to cook of an excellent extra virgin olive oil. You don't want a blend of different oils. You want an extra virgin olive oil only, okay? It's pure. I would go with like about a tablespoon, and then you're going to add it to the top as well so it gets a little crunchy and you hear that sizzle in the oven. Okay, so now we've got all of our things in here. The last item to go in is the milk over the breadcrumbs. Slowly, so that the breadcrumbs absorb it. Starts that gluten going when you're mixing it. Keeps your meatballs from getting too mealy. Rings are off, and we start folding the pork and the burger until everything is combined. All of those beautiful bits in the bowl get combined. So while I'm doing this, I can go over just a couple little things. I started the Family Eats a few years back when I did my very first family cookbook of Mom and my Nana's and my immediate family's favorite recipes. I grew up Sicilian, and so there's always an abundance of ideas for a meal or a dessert. So I put together our family's favorites and called it the Family Eats, and that's how the name started. Now I've evolved a little bit since then, and rather than just do a cookbook of recipes, I thought I would start my videos and demos. Also, I've expanded a little bit, and I'm doing some in-house demo classes where you can have a couple friends over, have the ladies over, pour some wine, and make a new dish that you never would have thought of trying. Great fun. Have a couple couples over, and you can all cook together, and everybody eats before the end of the night. So that's a little history on the Family Eats. My email address, I'll give that at the end as well, but I'll give it throughout. It is familyeats5967@gmail.com. Again, that's familyeats5967@gmail.com. Feel free to email me any questions or requests. You want to see something specific in the next video, I'd be more than happy to take the suggestion. And everything's cleared away. Give yourself enough room to work comfortably without a lot of things in your way. And this is what I use. My very favorite handy dandy ice cream scoop. Now this is a good hearty sized meatball. They make these smaller. They make these tiny. You can use a melon baller if you're making Italian wedding soup and you want tiny meatballs. And you can use the tiny little muffin pan rather than this regular sized muffin pan. Or you can get the jumbo muffin pans and make jumbo meatballs. And I'm talking softball sized meatballs. And that would be a meal with a dipper of sauce and maybe a couple slices of Italian bread. but not to go with a big pasta dinner. So let's get started here. So I like to do a nice flat, right to the surface meatball. Goes in, so they're all the same size. If you go up against your bowl with your ice cream scoop, clean off the edges, all of your meatballs are going to be the same size. Now granted, yes, they're going to shrink. Hamburger shrinks when it cooks, for sure. The fat breaks down. But you're starting out with all the same size. Once these are all cooked and cooled, and they're as dark golden brown as you want them to be, you let them cool right in their own pan. Don't take them out while they're good and hot, because those meatballs are going to break. They're going to break down. They're too hot to handle. So, I say, leave them right in the pan. Take them out when they're cool. They go right into a gallon or the jumbo Ziploc bags, but you gotta make sure they're definitely cool. Okay? Put them in those bags. Take all the air out. Don't crush them. Don't force them into a freezer if you don't have the room. Make the room. You don't want to ruin these beauties once they're cooked. You just went through all this trouble of getting them done for you so you don't have to mess with them. So when you're ready, you're making your Sunday sauce, all you got to do before you get started, while your sauce is simmering for its 2 to 3 hours, like I do my sauce, then all you have to do is let them thaw on the counter, near the stove, whatever. Pop them in your sauce. Now look at that. I didn't plan that perfectly, but it happened perfectly. I love it when a plan comes together. I have exactly 3, 6, 9, 12 beautiful sized meatballs and not a bit of hamburg left over. And they're all the same size. Take some of your extra virgin olive oil. Don't overdo it because you don't want to waste it. Nobody wastes olive oil. In this house anyway. Put about 2 tablespoons in. You can always add more. Okay? You're going to take your brush and you're going to brush each one till they're nice and shiny and glossy. And as they're cooking, they're going to start to brown. When you're done with your meatloaf, all you have to do is add a little thyme to your cook time and take them off bake, put them on broil. Not too close to the broiler. Nothing worse than a burnt top and a light colored meat on the bottom. You want these pretty uniform. They're not sitting on a cookie sheet. They're in a muffin pan. So you don't want them to steam. You want them to get crunchy. Okay, so our meatballs have cooled. They cooked on 400 for approximately, I would say, just under 25 minutes. And then I lowered it to 350 and let them go another 10 minutes. And they got good and golden brown. And now they're nice and cool. And so you can handle them to get them into the bag for the freezer. So I just scoop in a soup spoon, place them in your Ziploc bag. They come out nice and easy. And I got them on this white flat lid here because it's plastic and it can go in the freezer without any problem, not taking up too much room. And it will help keep your meatballs nice and flat in the freezer until they're solid. Once they're solid, you can take them off that tray and place them in the freezer, you know, just by themselves without any kind of support plate. The meatloaf is still cooling. I will come back at that when that is being sliced. I will come back to that and show you. But this is all you do. And you're going to slip this in the freezer. Like I said, let them get good and solid. they are absolutely delicious because, of course, I had to have a little taste, and so did my husband, just to make sure they were perfect, and they are. So, you're going to label them, label the bag before you put them in, make sure all the air is out, and you can label them. Italian meatballs, the date, whatever you want. These wouldn't last long enough for me to put a date on them in my freezer, so I would just put Italian meatballs on there. Okay, so there you go. Aren't they beautiful? Take a look at this baby. Nice and solid, crispy around the edges. This is going to make a beautiful meatloaf, mashed potato, and corn dinner, and cold meatball sandwiches, meatloaf sandwiches, and possibly even a nice heel to crumble up and make a small batch of chili. It pays to use the larger loaf pan, and the flavor, if you could just smell how great this smells. I'm not going to slice it because it's still a little warm. We're going to let it be nice and cool. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to hit that like button, and please share my video. We'll be back again next time with the next meal from the Family Eats. Thank you. Take care. Be well.